You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
Another episode of Booth Review presented by Emprise Bank. When was the last time you went into a bank? Now more than ever, who you're doing business with is more important than where they're located. Emprise Bank is a trusted business partner that can serve anyone, anywhere. That's Emprise Bank, member FDIC. So appreciative of them. All they've done here at KC Sports Network, as we've been, we're 18 months old, and they've been here along with us for every step. So we're really appreciative of them. I'm really appreciative of my guest today. He covers all things KU athletics for the Topeka Capital-Journal. Jordan Guskey, my man. What's good? How you doing?
Hey man, just chilling, watching basketball. How are you?
You know what? I'm feeling great. It's fun. It's a fun time to still be covering this football team, because if Kansas football wasn't playing right now, we wouldn't be doing this show. But the KU football team has advanced to the postseason for the first time since 2008. Jordan, how old were you in 2008?
Oh God, 2008, 12.
12 years old in 2000. I was trying to think. I was like 19 or 20 years old. So it's wild that like a whole decade plus has gone on, but now this team is they've made a bowl game. It's been announced. They're going to the Liberty Bowl. They're playing Arkansas. How are you disappointed that this isn't KU Missouri?
I think for the fan base, I think I am. I guess personally not so much, but I think the way it's sort of, just all that excitement that got bottled up into that really short period of time before the announcement, like you almost sort of wanted it for them. So in a way them, but I personally, it didn't really matter a whole lot.
It was just crazy to see like just the energy around it. I actually like, I think it's funny, and how aggressive, Missouri was in getting the message out that they would play anybody, anywhere, and all that stuff. From a Kansas perspective, I didn't love the idea of playing Missouri in a bowl game, just because the momentum of this program, the energy surrounding that game would just be a lot for this program that's been through so much. I almost just want a more focus to be on the developmental side of this for the month, and hopefully good things come from this bowl game. But I think the rivalry would have been extremely intense for this program to have to endure trying to play that, after a tumultuous second half of the season. It's like, that was just kind of my opinion on it. But like, I don't know. It would have been a very tense moment, I think, watching KU and Missouri try to battle it out in a bowl game that they haven't played in 14 years.
Yeah, I think I understand like the thought process behind schools when a rival leaves their conference, maybe not wanting to play that team for a while, because it happens, and I understand it. But I've always been someone who's like, if your rivals, like for the fans at least, try to make that stuff happen, because that stuff runs deep. And obviously, like you said, it's been a while since they played.
So we find out it's not Missouri. It's a battle for the right to use the word Kansas in your state name. It's Kansas versus Arkansas, the Razorbacks, in the Liberty Bowl. Initial thoughts about KU playing Arkansas. What you think about that?
Yeah, I think and this is something that I think Lance and I think Sam as well talked about during their teleconferences after the announcement. But there are some similarities, I guess, in how Arkansas hadn't struggled for as long as Kansas, but both are in early stages of a rebuild of sorts. This is sort of like, in a way, as close as it can be to Arkansas's year two, this year two for Kansas. So there's some similarities. So I think it's interesting to see where these teams are. A team that's trying to break through in the SEC against a team that's trying to break through in the Big 12 that's had some really interesting wins in the last couple of years. So I thought it was a great matchup for Kansas to get to as a measuring stick for where they are in year two of Lance.
It's going to be a little interesting, I think, with Arkansas, and like, there's going to be time we'll be discussing this on this show down the road, as we're getting build up towards that game. But like, I think one of the interesting things that I'm going to be monitoring is you look at the turnover that's happened at Arkansas since the transfer portal opened up. A lot of players have left, and Barry Odom, their defensive coordinator, just took the job at UNLV. So they're out their defensive coordinator too. You see a little bit of I don't know, chaos isn't the right word, but there's just been some big transitions already since their season ended at the hands of Missouri. Their regular season ended at the hands of Missouri. Kind of just fascinated to see what kind of version of that Arkansas team actually shows up.
Yeah, I think in the years to come, people aren't going to really think about who wasn't in the game for Arkansas, who wasn't in the game for Kansas. They're just going to look and see who won the game. Did Kansas get its first bowl win in a long time? And I think, like you're mentioning, Arkansas is going to be down some people on the coaching staff and in the roster. I think that one of their best defensive players isn't playing. That was a recent announcement, like you mentioned, the coordinator. So things are shaping up, in Kansas's way. Still an SEC team, still early in Lance's tenure, but things are shaping up pretty well for Kansas right now.
They got a pretty good quarterback too. KJ Jefferson. It sounds like he will be playing in that game. So that's definitely something I'm going to be monitoring as well. One thing I keep thinking about with this team is obviously the season's kind of been a tale of two teams for Kansas football. And I've spent a lot of time talking on this show about, the realities of how quickly this team accelerated into success, kind of represented in the tale of two halves of the season. Because the first half of the season, you're pretty healthy. You're playing with confidence. You've got a lot more depth at your disposal, and then the depth starts getting tested. And the realities of, this team, their front line is good enough to compete, but where they see some struggles is the depth being tested, the injuries start piling up, and you kind of saw this team start fading a little bit in the second half of the season. I'm curious to see, I don't know how you feel about this, but the thing I keep coming back to, and the thing I'm kind of curious about when it's all said and done, is are we going to see a team that more closely resembles the first half of the season or the second half? I think that's a big high level narrative that I'm going to be, thinking about and discussing, I think, over the course of the next couple of weeks while we, are anticipating this football game. But yeah, I think that's a big question mark for me is, Jalen Daniels, is he going to be healthy? There's some buzz out on Twitter today. Daniel Highshaw has a chance of playing this game. I'm curious to see what version of Kansas football we're getting with so much rest.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Daniel. The longer the season was going to go on, the more a bowl game became a reality. You start to wonder, if his rehab goes quick enough, what's possible. I guess, nothing has been said officially, but that's definitely something to think about. And, if you believe Lance, this is going to be the healthiest this team has been since early October, which puts you right around, that 5-game win streak that they went on to start the season. So that's a great thing for this team. Jalen said, the other day that, he's feeling good after having a couple games to get the rust off. The final 2 games of the season. I think in some ways it was important that it wasn't put on him to sort of will Kansas to a 6 win in those last 2 games back. He could just play, try to get some of that rust off, still try to get wins, still try to get to 7 or 8, and they can still get to 7. But I think it was important that this team could get healthy, still try to win. But, those last couple weeks didn't have the same sort of pressure that they might have had they not gotten that Oklahoma State win.
So, I mean, you've had a chance to, talk to Lance here and company. How big do you feel the gravity of this opportunity for Kansas to get an extra month with their kids and to get to play this game? Do you feel that? Do you kind of feel that when you're talking to this coaching staff, just the energy about this opportunity, or what's it like?
Yeah. I think that you always want to win, obviously, and Lance and that staff and that team isn't going to go in there being happy with the loss. But I think the month of development is going to be more important. That month of recruiting, as we've seen tonight, as we're taping this with Calvin committing, it makes it all the more important to have this month, the bowl game, to talk about. I think that's in some ways more important than how that game goes. And then if you win, it's the cherry on top of what's been a great season. If you lose, that's something to motivate you as you head into winter conditioning, spring ball, and then up into the 23 season.
One thing I'm kind of curious about, because red shirts are out the window now. I mean, there's some guys that they've been able to, a lot of guys have been able to save their red shirt. One thing I'm kind of curious about is if there's any guys that can climb out of not really playing the majority of the season that might get some opportunities and get some looks during the bowl game. Do you think that there's any young kids that we might get a shot at seeing, or is it probably going to be status quo with a lot of the veterans that we've already got a chance to see? Or what do you think?
I think maybe at wide receiver we see some guys. maybe in the defensive line you see some guys, but I think overall those younger guys, those guys who haven't been up in the depth chart, are gonna get that work in these practices and that extra month of development, and then maybe see more of the status quo, at least with guys who are healthy, in the bowl game. So I think maybe more so in those practices than the game itself, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm always just kind of curious if there's a couple of guys that sneak on and get a little bit of playing time towards the end of the year, just because, hey, But strategically, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but like strategically, sometimes if a guy is popping off, it actually makes sense to not have tape on him. So if he does wind up entering the transfer portal, there's always something strategic that you can talk about, or that you can kind of that you don't have any extra tape out on there. But one thing, all right, so you mentioned Calvin Clements, local kid, committed to Baylor, one of the better recruits in the entire state, the best offensive lineman prospect in the state, probably. And he winds up flipping from Baylor to Kansas today. What do you think the impact of a guy like Calvin Clements, of his caliber, flipping to Kansas is, and what does it say about the timeline to you?
Yeah, I think it's someone that these other recruits, maybe not in the 23 class, but in 24 and beyond, can look to and say, well, he did it. You won't be the first person to make that jump. Sort of like, I think a lot of people look to Devin as, like they're saying, as this rebuild's gone on, Calvin decided to make that jump. Maybe I'll decide to make that jump too. I can talk to Calvin about how that rebuild's gone. I can talk to Devin about how that rebuild's gone. So it's just the next guy. And I think at some points, maybe people didn't expect this sort of caliber of in-state player to commit to Kansas at this point. Like you mentioned, he was committed to Baylor, which is a great program under Dave Aranda, kept what Rules had built going. So I think it's that example that these in-state kids can look to, can put trust in, and then, like I mentioned, as these maybe bowl games turn into multiple seasons, you're going to see more Calvin Clements, Devin Neal's commit to Kansas.
Yeah, I just think it speaks volumes to just the growth of this program. We look at some comments that Lance Leipold has made. You might have been there for him, where he says, we've talked to some kids in the 2023 class, and if they got another year to see what's going on, maybe they would have had a better shot, or maybe they would have been more competitive in getting that guy to KU. And I mean, the instant success on a tight turnaround in 2023. Not saying that Calvin Clemens was necessarily one of those kids that was saying that, but man, just the impact of how quickly they were able to find success in Lawrence, Lance Leipold, and staff, getting a chance to get this kid to flip. And I think this is the kind of kid that you're going to have a chance to do something like that, right? Like, a local kid has been around the program. By all indications, he's spent a lot of time around the program still, even though he's been committed to Baylor. There's been some practices he's visited and stuff like that. So, that's the kind of kid you're going to have your best bet on in a short timeline. But man, it just makes you wonder what 2024 and 2025 can potentially bring in the local recruiting classes. And it gives you a lot of hope, I think, as this program continues to build.
Yeah, I think it shows that there are a lot of recruits who, well, I would imagine a lot of recruits who have a lot of trust in what Leipold's telling them, Leipold and that staff are telling them, that have a connection, with those coaches, with the players they might meet on campus. But like you're mentioning, you're trying to look for that extra little oomph to get over the finish line and commit. And Calvin was able to see that with the bowl game. I'm sure that'll matter to other recruits in future classes seeing this bowl game. And then as long as Kansas keeps sustaining this in the seasons to come, they'll keep getting those guys. More Calvins, like I mentioned.
All right, so I'm looking ahead a little bit here with you. What do you think the biggest position of need that KU has for to go into the portal? What position do you think KU needs to attack the most?
If guys don't develop, like I think Jeremy Robinson has a chance to develop into something. There are other guys along that defensive line who have a chance to develop into something. But if that development doesn't happen, then I would say another pass rusher to pair with Lonnie, I think would be a great thing to go for. And I think they're already, going after at least one guy, maybe more in the portal, who could potentially come to Kansas, which would be a great find for this staff. Like a lot what you see out of the wide receiver groups, a lot of guys who could potentially develop as well. But if you can bring in a plug and play guy who could be a number one option, I think that's a big thing to go for as well. Because I feel like elsewhere offensive line, I think they're going to be pretty good as long as everyone who you expect to come back comes back. Running back, quarterback, you're feeling good. Linebacker, you want to keep developing, but I feel like you're feeling good. And then maybe a cornerback or a safety if Kenny leaves as well. But I think for me personally, a pass rusher to pair with Lonnie if someone doesn't develop would be where I would want to go.
I like that. I like interior defensive line, adding more depth along the interior. Like Tommy Dunn looks really good. Deldrick Withers, or I think was that his name? I think it looks pretty. Is that right?
I think that's his name.
Yeah. I think he's looked all right. But yeah, just more interior depth along the interior, I think is pretty smart. One thing I'm kind of surprised about, and surprise isn't the right word. Pleasantly surprised. I look at the transfer portal, and the thing I don't see is a ton of KU names. The names that we expected to be in the transfer portal are in it, but it doesn't look like Kansas has really suffered much attrition to this point. Are you surprised? Do you think there could be more coming after the bowl game? Like, I don't know. I just would have anticipated there would have been more guys if they were coming out.
I do think I thought there would be more at this point than there has been. But I also feel like I thought that the bowl game would keep more guys in it longer. And then after that bowl game, maybe that's when you see a bigger wave of Kansas guys heading out after that bowl game is finished with. But I guess surprised a little bit. But I think, like I said, I thought, after the bowl game, more of that would come, and more after spring ball, maybe more of that would come as well.
Do you think so do we think they're in the clear, or do we think there's still going to be some attrition that they'll suffer? I think they'll probably lose a couple. I get them wanting to see things through with the bowl game, but I think that you could probably see a couple, but the fact that there wasn't a rush to on December 5th is a positive sign for this program too.
Yeah, I think in this landscape of college football, you can't say otherwise that you would say that there won't be, or you would anticipate there wouldn't be. I think in this current landscape, you would anticipate there probably is going to be someone or multiple people, and one or multiple of them probably will surprise you. I think Lawrence Arnold said he was going to transfer and then didn't transfer before this season. Could we see another one of those? I feel like it's more likely than not. But that it hasn't happened yet, so it looks like they're sticking for now.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, I could see a couple guys, maybe some players that would surprise, but I think it says a lot about the fact that, if that is the case, it seems like they're probably waiting until after the bowl game, which is, and it's an admirable thing, helping kind of see this program through. And outside of, a couple players, I think KU's better equipped to withstand some of that attrition too. Like, that's the thing, is like, I think KU, depending on how many players wind up leaving, like, I think KU is in a better position to potentially, deal with a little bit of that attrition more than they've ever been, because I think this team has some, top tier, top shelf players, but I think it's been, quality contributors contributing at a good clip around a star like Jalen Daniels. Right. So, I think that there is, I think they're going to be able to find some guys to replace some of these players too.
Yeah, I think it might depend on the position, but they seem to be, at least at this point, a pretty good spot to weather, some guys, like if a running back decided to leave, running back and offensive line decide to leave, they might be in an okay spot. But depending on some other positions like wide receiver, I think it might hurt a bit more. Like I mentioned, if Lawrence had actually left before the season.
Yeah, no, I'm with you for sure. Are you've been around the program a little bit? How surprised are you that they're at this point? I always like to ask people this question, like, how surprised are you that they were able to get to this point?
Yeah, no, really surprised. I think like Travis mentioned on Sunday, Lance mentioned sort of this similar thing. I was really surprised. I thought best case scenario this season 4-8, and then next year compete for a bowl, sort of like they are now. Might come down to the final weeks, but I thought what they did right now in 2022, I thought they would do in 23, or at least have the chance to, as long as they kept things rolling in 22. So yeah, definitely surprised by what they had going. And man, they were that close to being 6-0 if Jalen doesn't go down, and they had that same sort of second half. So they could have even gone a lot farther had this team stayed healthy. Daniel stays healthy. But injuries happen.
I think if Jalen Daniels plays a full 12, you're looking at a 7-5 type football team. I think that's probably would have been my guess, maybe 8-4. But yeah, I'd probably closer to 7-5 for me personally. But I mean, yeah, I think you might get a healthy version of him for this Arkansas game too. Like that's the thing I keep getting excited about. Is like I think you'll be able to see him utilized in the run game a little bit more. Jordan, I'm gonna get you out with this prediction. Are you allowed to make a prediction for this game for KU Arkansas?
I can do one. You want me to?
Yeah, go for it.
Oof. All right. I'm gonna go Kansas wins, and I'm gonna go 38-28. Well, 38-28, but it's a bowl win here.
That's a big dub right there. That is Jordan Guskey of the Topeka Capital-Journal. Jordan, my man, I genuinely appreciate you coming on and talking KU football with me. Thanks for spending some time with me.
Yeah, no problem, man.
That's another episode of Booth Review. Thank y'all so much. We'll catch you later.